Hey everybody, Fox here, and this is Elex by the developer Piranha Bytes. If you know anything about Piranha Bytes, it's probably from the Gothic series, the developer of the incredibly popular series in certain parts of Europe, but not as popular in the rest of the world. While Gothic did come to North America, it was often blasted for its jankiness and awkwardness and extreme difficulty and brutally slow leveling curve. Gothic did not present you with a world in which you are the hero of the lands and you are this powerful warrior who grows ever stronger with each battle and as you complete more missions. No, quite the opposite. Gothic throws you into a world where you are a weak, pathetic nobody, and just about everyone and everything can kill you in one shot or close to it. If you start Gothic out thinking you're just going to begin fighting enemies and growing more powerful, you're likely to find that your first encounter with the weakest enemy in the game will result in you dying over and over again, because you're just not strong enough to handle almost anything in the game at that point. Even finding the most basic of weapons and armor is extremely difficult, and you'll be struggling to get any amount of currency from the beginning of the game. None of the NPCs in the game seem to care who you are for the most part, and many of them will treat you like garbage, basically saying that you're useless and worthless and pathetic, and that's because you essentially start the game useless, worthless, and pathetic, and you've got to work your way up. In the beginning of the game, you're basically scraping your way by, eking a living, doing the most basic of things, and trying your best to avoid nearly every combat encounter because you're simply not prepared for them yet. You don't have any armor, at least none that's good, you don't have a decent weapon, and your stats are so low that essentially the most basic of little bird-like creatures can kill you in a couple shots at most. So given that description of the Gothic series, you might be wondering why it's so beloved by many gamers around the world, particularly many in certain parts of Europe. Well, it came from Piranha Bytes, a developer located in Germany, and a lot of people in that area take a lot of pride in a game that didn't come from one of the standard development studios. In addition to that, Gothic is very different from a lot of other games. Most games don't start you out as weak and pathetic, a nobody that's not expected to achieve anything. Most games start you out as the chosen hero, and you have challenges in the game, but generally speaking, there are always these really weak enemies that you can easily defeat. Many RPGs allow you to fight basic enemies at the start of the game where you can just blindly mash a button and win. Gothic forces you to fight and struggle for each and everything you achieve in the game. If you want to get a little bit of gold, you gotta fight for it, and you gotta fight hard. If you want to defeat the weakest, most basic enemy of the game, you really have to struggle to do that as well. If you want to find a halfway decent weapon, that's also going to be a challenge. You see, Gothic is all about starting out extremely weak and small, a nobody that means nothing to anyone, and growing that character up into what ultimately becomes the hero of the story. You don't start out as the hero. You're not the destined one. There's no prophecy about you. You are a nobody when you start out, and you have to work your way up the ranks however you can do that. So having laid that as the groundwork, Elex should come as no surprise that it's very similar in many ways. Now, your character does have a backstory shrouded in mystery, and you quickly get the impression that you have some importance in the story of the world, but you start out extremely weak and pathetic. And some of the most basic, weakest enemies in the game can defeat you immediately with little effort. You'll find yourself struggling to obtain anything in the game. You never have enough money for anything. You never seem to have good enough armor. You never seem to have a good enough weapon. And you're constantly asking people where you can get better armor and better weapons, and most of them don't give a shit about you. They don't care. They're not going to offer it to you. They're going to make you do stuff to earn small amounts of money where you might eventually, after an extended period of time, be able to get a halfway decent weapon that still leaves you in a very difficult place when it comes to fighting the enemies of the world. In fact, even when you have in-game armor and weapons, it doesn't mean that the weaker enemies of the game can't still kill you. If you get surrounded by a bunch of them, yes, even some of the weakest enemies of the game still could whittle you down and kill you if you're not very careful and if you're not playing the game right. So why the hell would anybody want to play Gothic or Elex? Well, I can tell you, it's because neither Gothic nor Elex feel like most other action role-playing games. They feel very different. They're doing something different. They're making you work for everything that you get. And while some people will not be able to appreciate that, I was able to eventually get the hang of Elex. I'd tried the Gothic games before and never really got too far in any of them. I've even played Arcania, which was supposed to be Gothic 4, but it really didn't have all that much to do with Gothic and was universally panned. So if you're like most gamers, you'll pick up a copy of Elex and you'll start playing it. When you first start out, Jax, the main character, has just crash-landed on the planet, and now he has to try to find his way in the world. You try to find a weapon or anything, actually, you're just picking up whatever you can, struggling to get out of this little small area that you're in, which kind of serves as a bit of a landscape and maneuverability tutorial on how you can get around in the world. And after that, you might encounter one of the first enemies. You begin combat, and you immediately die. Yeah, I imagine most players who pick up Elex will encounter their first couple enemies and go, nope, this is garbage, and then they're going to refund it if they can. Based on the Steam achievements for the game, less than a quarter of the people that get what is essentially the first achievement of the game actually complete the game. That's right, using your jetpack for the first time gives you an achievement, which is 88.3% of players. But actually completing the game, that's only 21.1% of players. So that means less than a quarter of all the players who do one of the first things that you do in the game actually take Elex all the way to completion. And when I say completion there, I mean just finishing the in-game quest. I don't mean actually 100% of completion, because that's a far, far lower number. While many of the achievements listed for Elex are pretty basic stuff, you know, getting a certain amount of money, reaching a certain level, killing a certain number of monsters, upgrading weapons a certain number of times, and all that jazz, one of the more interesting achievements is the achievement you get for just playing for 80 hours. Now, that's one that might sound like you have to invest 80 hours of playtime, but what you could essentially do is boot the game up, load up a game, and just leave the main character just standing there doing nothing, walk off, and let it ride. Because as long as 80 hours are completed of in-game time, whether you're there or not, I think that achievement's gonna get a pop. So you could literally just leave the game unattended for those hours and get that achievement. If you've never played a Piranha Bytes game before, such as Gothic or Ryzen, then Elex is a rude awakening when you first boot it up and get started. It may seem okay in the first few minutes, but it wouldn't take long for you to realize, yeah, this isn't like a lot of other games. It does have a lot of issues, and I can see why most people would pick up the game and immediately think, nope, this is not for me, and promptly refund it. You would not be blamed at all if you gave this a shot after watching my video and decided, hey, you know, this Fox guy is full of shit. This isn't a good game. And you know, I wouldn't blame you either. Look, what I'm saying is don't go into Elex expecting a typical action RPG game. This is not like other games that look exactly like it. Like I said, you could watch some gameplay footage of this game, you could look at the trailers and think, okay, I know what kind of game this is going to be, and I think I'd like it. Well, you probably don't know what kind of game this is going to be, and you may or may not like it, depending on whether you can put up with a lot of its idiosyncrasies. Elex is like any long-running magazine. It's got a lot of issues. This is where you laugh. That was a joke, but there is some truth behind it. Also, just let me say this, okay? I really hate the way Elex is being advertised. If you look at the launch trailer, the first trailer that pops up on Steam, it looks fine as far as the gameplay. It actually shows you what's going on when you play the game. The problem I have with it is the really stupid pop song that plays with it that is completely contrary to the way the game feels, the game's story, and the game's atmosphere. It does not fit at all, and it will give you the completely wrong impression of what it's like to play the game. I think the name of the song is Check It Out by Oh the Larceny, a band I'd never heard of, and a song I've never heard before. It's not a song I particularly like. I can see somebody liking it, but I can tell you right now, it does not fit the game Elex. It doesn't fit in the world of Elex. It doesn't even fit for a trailer, in my opinion. I wish developers and or publishers would stop doing this. Please stop using pop songs or basically music that's just out there, some song from some band to advertise your game, especially when it does not fit at all. I wish I could play it for you so you could see just how inappropriate this song is for the game, but then, you know, what would happen? I would get flagged as using a copyrighted song, so just go to the Steam store page and listen to it for yourself. You can also find it on YouTube, but there's a couple different ones with, I think, a different song in it, so go to the store Steam page, listen to this really stupid song, at least in terms of pairing it with Elex, and you'll probably agree with me, does not fit at all. Very stupid choice on their part. I really hope this was something forced on them by the publisher, rather than something that the Piranha Bytes team chose and thought, oh yeah, this works, we'll just advertise our game with this stupid song. But the good news is that the song from the trailer does not appear anywhere in the game, as far as I'm aware. I never heard it once in the game, not even during the ending credits, so this really doesn't affect the actual gameplay and your experience of the game, and you may not even be aware of it if you don't bother watching the trailer. So Elex originally released back in 2017, and it was at least successful enough to warrant a sequel, Elex 2. Now, most people say that they do not enjoy Elex 2 as much as they enjoyed the original, saying that the sequel just didn't do enough new and seemed to recycle a lot of content from the first game, and in that way it just wasn't as exciting, wasn't as novel, new in experience, and so therefore it felt like just kind of like Elex all over again in some ways. And for that, I think Elex 2 could have been just a massive DLC for the first game. I have yet to play Elex 2 myself, but I've seen quite a few gameplay videos about it and some other people that have done reviews on it, and it does appear very similar to the first game from what I can tell. The biggest change they made was allowing you a lot more use of your jetpack. Yes, that's right, Elex has a jetpack. It has very limited use because there's a bar that immediately starts depleting once you start using it, so you can't really use it to just fly all around. It's mainly used to get to higher ledges or to sort of mitigate falls from high above, because if you do fall too far, you can die, at least be injured from it, if not outright die. And using the jetpack, you can essentially jump from any height you want. As long as you just kind of tap the jetpack a few times right before you land, you're good to go. And I have to say, this was one of the more fun parts of the game, using the jetpack to get to slightly higher ledges than you normally would, crossing chasms, or just, you know, getting around issues like lava areas of the game that would impact you with fire damage, was really exciting and fun, and I enjoyed the fact that no matter how far I was going to fall from a height, I could just pop that jetpack a few times, give it a few bursts, and I would land safely down below. Now, why haven't I picked up Elex 2 yet? Well, it is on my wish list, but I'm telling you right now, this is not the kind of game that I would consider to be worth the $50 asking price. I picked up Elex on sale. I can't remember the exact sale amount, but it was pretty darn cheap. I either picked it up when it was about $10 or a little under $8, and at that price, I would consider it more than worth it. In fact, I would say you could pay as much as $20 for this and get a lot of value out of it, although whether you'd want to pay the full $30 current asking price is whether or not you really enjoy Piranha Bytes style games like Gothic and Ryzen, because this very much is a somewhat spiritual successor to those two series. Elex 2 has been known to drop as low as $12.49 and just did so recently in November of 2025, but I somehow missed that, otherwise I certainly would have picked it up, but I didn't get a notification from Steam about it, at least I didn't see that, and I didn't notice it when I occasionally peruse my wishlist to see which games are on discount. The standard sale price for the game is $16.49, which I would definitely consider worth it from what I've seen of Elex 2 and from my experience of Elex. Alright, well, I've said the word Elex countless times in this video, and that makes sense. It's the name of the game, literally. But why is it called Elex? Well, I can tell you there's a very specific and obvious reason it's called Elex if you play the game. A comet hit the world of Magalan, which is similar to Earth in many ways, and it completely changed everything. A lot of people died, and it basically changed the entire landscape, setting the world back in many ways to more primitive societies, even though there are technologically advanced civilizations still in existence during the current Elex timeframe. But you will see remnants of the old world, you'll see vehicles, destroyed buildings, and it's very reminiscent of a game like Fallout, the Fallout series, because it is essentially similar to what would happen if there were a nuclear war, and then you see the aftermath like 100 or 200 years later. There's a lot of overgrowth, and some of the buildings look like they're basically being taken over by nature, but in addition to that, there's this substance that was contained in the comet that they've called Elex. It's sort of like a blue crystalline substance that has become a currency as well as a source of a lot of power. Those who use Elex directly take on a very strong white color to the skin, and they also begin to lose all of their emotions. They become far more powerful, but they also just become these logical, emotionless beings. Some have found a way to derive mana from the Elex, creating a sort of magic system, and that's what the Berserkers use, whereas the Albs, the initial antagonists of the game, are these somewhat automaton-like human beings that have lost all emotion, become extremely powerful, and they serve this mysterious one known only as the Hybrid. I would say that if you're gonna play Elex only for the combat, for the gameplay, you may find it a bit disappointing because there are a lot of issues there with it. However, if you do play games for the story and you care about good stories in video games, then I can tell you right now, Elex has an amazingly good story for what it is. Doesn't always have the best voice acting, but the voice acting is never actually bad. It's always passable. The characters are somewhat interesting. They seem like, they could be real characters in a real world like this, Magalan. And the overall mystery of the game is interesting enough to keep you going. You do want to figure out what's going on. How did this comet come to hit the world of Magalan? What does the comet mean? What is Elex? And is there anything else behind it all? And I'm going to give you a secret here. There may be something behind it all. It may not have been just a random comet strike. Or maybe it was. I don't know. You'll have to play the game to find out.
But before you ask any more questions, let's get one thing clear. All the free people need to be properly trained if we want to survive what's coming. Those Albs want to destroy us all. I won't accept a lack of discipline. I expect loyalty, hard work, application, and results.
Now, I will go into some spoiler territory later, but I'll try to give you a heads up so you can skip that part if you don't want part of the story ruined for you. But I can say this, even if you know something about the story, it's probably still worth playing just to see the way it all sort of unravels and unfolds in front of you. In Elex, you take on the role of Jax, a former Alb commander of sorts, who crash-landed after his raider, its sort of flying vehicle, was struck or damaged in some way. It crash-landed, and now you gotta try to figure out what happened. How did you come to crash land, and what exactly is going on? You're also going to try to learn the mysteries of the world, because when you were an Alb, you basically just did what the Hybrid told you to do. Whatever the Hybrid said was essentially the word of God as far as you were concerned. You didn't question it, you just did it, you didn't even think about it. But now that you're coming down off the effects of Elex, you're experiencing that Elex withdrawal, you've got your emotions back, and you can begin to experience the world as an actual human being. Now, many people may criticize Jax as a character because he has a very deadpan approach to the dialogue in the game. He often sounds like he's just reading lines, and it's not particularly engaging, as if the voice actor wasn't doing the best job in the world.
Know about the old world?
Only what I've learned on my travels.
Ruins and wreckage. The old world is irrelevant.
Irrelevant? It's where we all came from.
Here, I found these.
Elex technology.
Let's go on to Goliath.
Right. Follow me.
So, what can I do during my stay? I need better weapons and armor. Teach me something.
However, having played the game through to completion, I can tell you right now, I think the voice actor did the job the developers wanted him to do, and I think he actually did it pretty well, because Jax was formerly an Alb, a human that's been converted by Elex into this sort of emotionless, logic-based creature, and so when you think about it, he's coming off of that, but he's trying to remember his emotions. He's trying to remember what it's like to be a normal human being that has feelings, and so he will come off as a bit dry and deadpan, and that's exactly what would happen to a person who lost all their emotions and is slowly regaining them. However, because of this, Jax can come off as very dry, very stale, very kind of nonchalant, like he doesn't really care about anything. He's just solely focused on his mission, and he doesn't seem to react in the way you would expect a normal human being to react. But then again, for the reasons I gave you, that makes sense in this context. However, it doesn't stop Jax from feeling kind of like a dull character in many ways. But hey, maybe you're one of those gamers that's kind of a recluse from life and don't have a lot of social connections, you don't have a lot of friends, maybe you don't have any romantic interests, you're just kind of by yourself playing video games a lot, and so you can connect with Jax as a guy that's not very sociable, if that's the kind of person you are. But don't worry, because there is some hope here for Jax and for you, because if you play your cards right, Jax can indeed enjoy some romance with one of the female characters in the game, so that proves to all of us that even if you are a bit of a social reject, even if you're not fully in tune with your social, emotional skills and all that, you too, just like Dax, can get yourself a romantic partner. And that brings us to the sponsor of this video, elovefinder.com, where you can find the partner of your choice, the love of your dreams. Just go to elovefinder.com. I'm just kidding, guys. I don't even know if that's a real website. I haven't checked. One of you can check for me. There is no sponsor. I'm not actually advertising anything. And if it is a real website, I have nothing to do with it, and I'm not actually advertising it, okay? It's just a joke. Okay, so I took a break from recording and I looked it up, and elovefinder.com is indeed a real website. But again, guys, I have nothing to do with it. I was just throwing that out there as a joke. I didn't think it would be real. It is. You don't have to go there. I'm certainly not affiliated with it. I'm not recommending it. I know nothing about it except that it exists. And to the elovefinder.com domain owner, please don't sue me. I haven't done anything worth suing. So one thing I'm not interested in doing is just like a regular old review of a game to determine whether or not you should buy it. I prefer to really talk about my experiences with the game, how it made me feel, and what I went through while playing it. And, you know, Elex is an interesting game. I've talked a lot about how it's awkward, how it can be janky at times in many ways, how the way that the combat and the attributes and all of this stuff comes together just doesn't work the way it would work in just about any other game. Like I said, you can increase your strength attribute, but that's not actually going to improve the amount of damage you do. It's essentially a determiner for certain dialogue options and which equipment options that you have available to you. Because if something has a certain strength stat requirement, you have to reach that requirement to use it, or at least use another item that boosts your strength. But other than that, boosting your strength further doesn't increase the actual damage output you do with that weapon. Some of the other attributes will also affect some of the skills you can use in the game, and you get both attribute points as you level up and skill points. Skill points are used at trainers who can train you in certain things like acquiring more trophies from when you kill some of the mutant animals in the game, increasing your armor factor, getting more experience points from reading books and notes in the game, being able to upgrade weapons further, boosting combat skills, being able to enchant a weapon, being a better hunter, having extra hit points, having things like fire resistance or frost resistance, being able to socket gems in your weapons, being able to craft weapons, being able to get more health from the things that you eat and consume, being able to use things like grenades and other specialized weapons. You can learn a jetpack-based attack that is not default to the game. You actually have to get a skill for that. You can learn better lock picking so that you can pick higher level locks, and the list goes on and on. There's melee weapon skills that can improve the damage you do with those. There are things for ranged weapons, magic, the mana, all sorts of things. You know, it's very confusing because if you look at the list of them, it's not really abundantly clear what they all do. So you may find yourself looking stuff up about the game online. It's one of those games where the stuff that's told to you in the game doesn't always adequately explain what exactly is going on, and even if you read a tutorial or if you read the description of the skill, it may mislead you into exactly what you're getting when you spec into it. I spent most of the game without a companion, so I went with the one-man army skill, which I was able to learn and do. I think it was like 10% more damage when fighting alone. So depending on how you want to play the game, you may get different skills from different trainers. However, you need more than just the skill points and the trainer and the money to pay for it. You also have to meet the minimum attribute requirements, many of them requiring things like intelligence or cunning, strength, dexterity, or constitution. So there's a lot that goes into this. It can be pretty complex, and if you know what you're doing, you can really spec out your character pretty well. But keep in mind that this is not one of those standard action role-playing games where you just get the appropriate attributes for the weapon you want, and then you keep boosting the attributes that boost the damage of the weapon. That's not a thing here. That's the weirdest part about Elex is, like I said, just boosting your strength won't increase the damage you do with that heavy melee weapon. Pickpocketing is also a skill you can learn, but I didn't bother doing any pickpocketing at all. Part of that was because I figured it wouldn't be all that valuable. I learned some lockpicking skill, but the more locks I picked, the more I realized that the stuff in most of the chests and cabinets and whatever was locked wasn't really worth getting to. In fact, sometimes I'd pick a lock, break a lockpick in the process, I'd pick the lock eventually, and then find that there's nothing in there but a couple forks and dinner plates. Yeah, I'm not joking. Now, yes, you can sell those things, but they're not really worth much. So I found that a lot of times the treasure you could get from lockpicking just really wasn't worth it. This is a major issue in a lot of games. I also found this to be a problem in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, it's not necessarily that you have to pick the lock, but sometimes you'll see this treasure chest off in the distance. It's up high, and you got to figure out how to get to it. Might take you a minute to get there. You finally get to it. You open the treasure chest up, and as I pointed out in my review of Dragon's Dogma 2, what was in the treasure chest? Dude, I kid you not. It was a freaking fish. One fish. Just a fish that you can eat. One fish in a treasure chest that took me several minutes to figure out how to get to. Who the hell would put this treasure chest out here way up high, drawing attention to it, making you think, oh, hey, look, treasure. There's going to be good treasure in there. You go up there, you open the treasure chest, and it's a freaking fish. Come on, guys. Like, what the hell? Is that just kind of like randomized loot, and it just happened in my game to be nothing more than a fish? That's lame. Nobody wants to spend all that effort opening a treasure chest just to find a fish in there. Better be a damn golden fish that I can sell for a ton of money, but no, just a regular fish like any other fish you'd find in the game. So in like manner, Elex has treasure chests and other things where you open them up, and oh boy, there's a fork and a dinner plate, a couple dinner plates. Wow, I can sell that for a few Elixit, which is the currency in the game, and that's worth almost nothing, because as you get further in the game, stuff will start costing thousands of Elixit. And you know the average number of Elixit that you find in like some deposit somewhere? You find them one at a time, maybe 4 or 5 scattered about. So you pick up the Elixit 1, pick up the Elixit 1, pick up the Elixit 1. You're adding 1 to your collection of Elixit currency when you need about 20,000 to buy that really cool in-game armor. Or you need like 4,000 for this weapon you're saving up for. If you were to go out and pick up the Elixit one by one to try to get that really cool weapon, you would literally have to pick up individually 4,000 Elixit pieces. That's absurd. It's ridiculous. So I actually did install a few mods to make the game easier and more balanced. One of the biggest issues with Elex is that it's really just very imbalanced. The balance in this game is horrifically off. Sometimes you can get something that's super valuable by just picking it up when no one's looking, effectively stealing it, but you basically just wait for people to wander off, pick it up, and there you go, you got some super powerful weapon. But sometimes you have to pick a lock or maybe pickpocket, and you get almost nothing at all, nothing of value. And that's something you spec into with skill points and paid for. Like, you spent a lot of your resources getting that skill to get virtually nothing, but if you want a really cool weapon, you just wait until people aren't looking, and pick it up, and then it's yours. That's it. So basically, it's the amount of effort, cost, and risk that often isn't worth the things that you get, and sometimes it's low risk, low effort, low cost to get something really, really good. How does that make any sense? It doesn't. So yeah, I did install a few mods. I installed a mod where when you pick up a single Elixit from the game world, it actually gives you 5 instead of 1, and to be honest, that's still a really low number. I think if you're going to be picking them up, spending the time to click the button to pick this thing up, 1 just isn't worth it. I started ignoring them even when they were worth 5 each because it wasn't worth it. Towards the end of the game, I had like 65,000 Elixit from doing quests and selling a whole bunch of junk and some other things, and it just takes way too long to collect enough money to buy anything of value. And that's one of the big discouraging things about Elex, is it's going to take you a really long time doing a lot of quests, killing a lot of monsters, collecting a lot of loot, then selling the loot, then collecting more loot, then selling the loot, then collecting the Elixit currency one by one in the game world to eventually get the hundreds or thousands that you need to start upgrading your character's gear. It's just not balanced, it's frustrating, and it takes way too long, and ultimately I made that decision not because it made the game easier, it just made the game less aggressively slow, if that makes sense. It just takes way too long in games like Gothic or Ryzen, or in this case Elex, to really get anywhere, and you spend so much time being a nobody that's super weak and can't do anything that I ultimately think is just kind of boring towards the beginning of the game. So although a lot of people appreciate what the games are doing and starting you out really weak and pathetic and having nothing, and you have to claw your way up out of that nothing, that's really too slow, I think, for most modern gamers to put up with. So if you can, I recommend playing the game on PC and getting some of these mods that rebalance the game and also reward you more adequately for the things that you do in the game. And yes, basically it is cheating, but I don't really have a problem with that because it makes the game a lot more fun, and a lot more people would actually play through Elex, put far more hours into it, maybe even complete it, if the game weren't so brutally slow and such a slog to get anywhere. And these mods can actually help you out a lot. Now, not everyone agrees that the mods are entirely helpful. If you get some of these rebalancing mods, they may change some things that you don't want to change, but ultimately I think they're better than not having them. Anyone familiar with Piranha Bytes games like Gothic and Ryzen will not be surprised to find that there are factions in the game that you can join. Joining one faction automatically precludes you from joining the other two. There are 3 factions in the game. The first one you're introduced to is the one in Goliath, the Berserkers. They eschew the direct use of Elex and instead convert it into mana, giving them the power of magic, and they mainly focus also on melee as well. You also have the Outlaws that are essentially a scavenging kind of faction. They basically believe in, do whatever you can to get ahead in life. Some of them are thieves. Some of them will basically kill other people to take what they have. And joining the Outlaws is something I had no interest in doing, so I didn't do it at the time. And there's a third faction, the one I chose to join, the Clerics. They have the absolute coolest hub in the game, the Hort. It is super technologically advanced. They got these big robots and mechs walking around. You get really cool armor, and I basically chose them because I loved the way the armor looked. Joining the Clerics meant that I had to put up with their nonsense with this sort of god that they worship called Kalan. And Kalan is, well, obviously not a god. You can figure out what Kalan is by basically either stumbling upon it or following a quest. I happened to pretty much just stumble upon the secret of Kalan and what it really is. Shocker here, spoiler, it's not a god. But yeah, they talk a lot about Kalan and doing Kalan's will and all this other stuff. And yeah, whatever, I didn't care about that nonsense. I just gave lip service to it so I can get some of the cool weapons and armor that the clerics specialize in. One thing that I thought was kind of unrealistic and frustrating, something that didn't really seem to fit with the game, is that each faction has its own unique weapons, armor, and sometimes amulets or rings. And if you try to use one of these things and you're not in the faction, it basically tells you that you can't use it because you're not a member of the faction. I had the Outlaws ring that I found. I think I found it in some random deposit somewhere. I tried to put it on for the benefits, and it said that I couldn't use it because I'm not in the Outlaws faction. So the question is, what's stopping Jax from just using the armor or the ring or amulet from a faction without being part of it? What's the problem there? Why can't you do that? Shouldn't you be able to do that? Why can't I put on this armor just because I'm not in the Clerics? For example, if you're not in the Clerics, you can't use the really cool Cleric armor, even if you find it in the game. Even if you get some Cleric items, you can't put them on. They could have had a much better system going about that, and instead of basically saying, well, sorry, you can't use this because you're not in the faction, a very kind of video gamey thing, instead, how about if you wear the armor or ring or amulet or whatever of a faction you're not part of, anytime you encounter a member of that faction that sees you using it and knows you're not a member, they immediately attack you and try to take it. So say they knock you out and then they take it from you and you lose it. That would make a lot more sense. So that would make it to where if you're going to wear cleric stuff that you're not supposed to wear because you're not a cleric, anytime you encounter the clerics, they're going to attack you, knock you out, and take it. That would add a whole new level of risk to where you have to remember anytime you're going to wander into the cleric town, you better take that cleric stuff off because you're not a member. That would fit in the game and feel totally natural, whereas it does not feel natural and does not fit to simply be told a video game thing about, well, you can't use this because you're not one of the faction members. And I wanted to mention some minor annoyance that really didn't fit anywhere else in this semi-review of Elex, not a full review. But basically, I ended up settling on a chain saber as my main melee weapon. I mainly went with melee, although I did have a laser rifle that was pretty powerful. I gotta say, if you want to play this game the easy way, you're probably going to go with ranged attacks, but I don't do it the easy way. I prefer melee in just about any game I play. I almost always prefer melee to magic or ranged attacks. If I have the option of a mage or a priest or an archer or the warrior or knight, I'm going with the warrior or the knight. That's just kind of my play style. So here I am with this chain saber. Every time I start combat and Jax takes that chain saber out, you hear that loud whirring noise of the chainsaw going. It's basically a chainsaw saber weapon. And yeah, it's cool at first, but you quickly get really tired of hearing the chainsaw sound all throughout combat. And it's pretty loud and distracting. And I wish someone had made a mod to just turn that effect off. I don't need to hear that every single time. In fact, I think it would have been better that they just played the chainsaw sound effect one time when you drew the weapon out, and then that was it. Hearing it constantly over and over again was very annoying and actually made me want to stop using it. So I reverted to a different weapon, a sword that the clerics use. I think it was called the Regent sword or something like that. But it just didn't do quite as much damage, and I ultimately decided to stick with the most damage, even if I have to put up with the annoyance of the sound effect. Another annoying thing I have to mention is the really awkward way you control the cursor and navigate the in-game map. For some reason, the cursor, whether you're using it on mouse and keyboard or a gamepad, the cursor in the map screen moves extremely slow. And if you're at a different zoom level in the map, you can actually find that the cursor will stop short of going to the destination you want it to. Like, let's say you want to teleport to this warp point, and you can discover warp points in the game. So you're moving the cursor ever so slowly across that map, but because of the zoom level you have, it actually stops short of reaching the teleport point, and you can't move it any closer. So then you have to zoom in and then continue to move it closer, and then may find you're still not zoomed in, so you have to zoom in again and then slowly move the cursor over to the point that you want to click on. I don't know why it works that way, and I also don't know why it's so jerky and strange. Like, when you go into the map, it's really jerky, it's janky, it feels like it's moving at a super slow frame rate. The game is not reporting a lower frame rate when in the map screen, but it certainly feels like it's a super low frame rate. Like you're going at like 7 frames per second or something with this super jerky movement. So I don't know what it is about that map screen and navigating it. It's a huge pain, very uncomfortable to use, and I wish they had fixed that. Another thing is, while the game is very dynamic and you can get certain characters to either be on your side or be against you and you got to suffer the consequences, and while you can actually kill very important characters with a message popping up on the screen, it'll say something to the effect of, the death of so-and-so will have far-reaching consequences. Yeah, they let you know. They just straight up tell you, hey, you killed an important character. We're going to let you do that, but there are going to be consequences for this. You're going to be locked out of certain quests. Other people may now see you as an enemy. And in this case, I was in the town of the Berserkers, Goliath, and I was talking to a character that had gotten caught doing something that broke the Berserker law. I confronted him about it, and he wanted me to basically cover for him to violate the Berserkers law, and I hadn't decided whether I was going to join the Berserkers or not, so I didn't want to violate the Berserker law and potentially be hunted down by the Berserkers, so I told him, nope, sorry. And I think the only option I had was basically an F you. You're just going to die. The Berserkers are going to put you to death. So he decided to F me instead, and he became aggressive and hostile towards me and was trying to kill me. He was super powerful, and I really wasn't equipped to kill him at the time, so I went running off. Well, I noticed that whenever I returned to try to get into the tavern where he was sitting next to, he would come after me again. So I basically felt like I couldn't go to that part of the town without him coming after me. And when he did, instead of other people in the town realizing he's committing a crime by trying to murder me, they would also join him and attack me. So I wasn't able to even explain to anyone that he's the bad guy trying to kill me. They would join in. So if I did actually want to fight him, I had to be super careful not to accidentally hit the other guys trying to fight me, because then that would set them as hostile and aggressive towards me and make me violate the Berserker law. So I had to try to get him off by himself away from the other characters and fight him. And then I found there was another guy in the town that would start shooting me with arrows and do massive damage, killing me in like 1 or 2 shots. Made it nearly impossible to get past that point. But after several times and eventually getting better gear, I was able to actually kill him without hurting anyone else. I then had to leave the town, then come back to find that they were no longer hostile towards me. So while it is really cool, all the options you have in terms of who you side with, who you're against, who you're allowed to kill, which is basically just about anybody in the game, they don't account for all eventualities, and sometimes you can find yourself in a tricky situation like I did, where you're stuck with essentially what is a bad guy violating the rules trying to kill you, but then the other good guys join with him and try to kill you, and there's no way for you to explain yourself or resolve it, at least none that I could find. I mean, realistically, when Jax notices these other people becoming hostile towards him along with that bad guy, he would be like, whoa, hold up, guys. This is the guy that did this. He broke this law. He's violating your rules. He's the one you should be fighting. Let's bring him before the leader of the Berserkers and get this addressed. But no, you don't have that option. Jax doesn't say anything. You just have to deal with the fight. And like I said, if you do decide to kill those other characters, which are supposedly good guys, at least in a sense they're good guys, you're going to be held liable for that, and you could find yourself being attacked by the other Berserkers or having to pay a hefty fine. And on top of all that, after killing this dude who violated the Berserkers' laws, who was trying to murder me to hide the fact he's violating their laws, I went to one of the Berserker leaders in the town, and he accused me of murder and said I violated their laws. And I'm like, oh shit, now I'm in bad with the Berserkers. Now I can't even come back. I'm going to have to run out of here to avoid dying and avoid this town entirely. But no, all he did was require me to pay some extremely low amount of currency, Elixit, like 50 Elixit, for having murdered somebody. That doesn't make any sense. Like, just about everything in the game costs more than 50 Elixit. I mean, health potions cost more than 50 Elixit, but the fine for murdering one of their own people is some cheap 50 Elixit. Can you imagine murdering someone in real life in a small town, in some village or whatever, and then they come to you and say, look, you murdered this guy, so you better give us, $20. $20 and that'll cover it. $20 is the fine for murder. So depending on the gameplay footage that you're looking at with Elex, you might get the false impression that this is like a high fantasy type game similar to Oblivion, where you wear what looks like kind of regular, old-fashioned medieval style armor, you fight with swords and shields, and you battle creatures, beasts, mythical beasts even. Or you could see other gameplay footage and think that this is a sci-fi fantasy game where you're essentially shooting lasers at robots. So which is it? Is this a high fantasy game with monsters, or is this a sci-fi game with robots and mechs? Well, the answer to that is yes. Yes, it is. It's both, actually. You may find yourself both fighting a mythical cyclops beast with a sword and shooting a laser rifle at combat robots and mechs. They do both. And in a way, it kind of comes together. It makes sense if you look at the story of Elex and you really experience the game. At first, it might seem a very strange dichotomy, and in many ways it is, but it also fits with the story of Elex, because when the comet hit, it sort of set the world back quite a bit, but some of the civilizations here have managed to get a hold of that technology and use it. They've also managed to use this new substance known as Elex to create a form of magic and mana. And so in many ways, it all kind of comes together in its own unique, janky, and strange way. So you get to both smack monsters with a sword out in the woods, and you get to shoot at robots in sci-fi advanced scenarios with a laser rifle. Hey, isn't that the best of both worlds? And in a way it is, it's also not, because neither of these combat mechanics feel all that good. In fact, most of the combat is, well, pretty janky and awkward. Dodging can either be really easy or frustratingly difficult when stuff is hitting you, even though visually on screen it appears to be nowhere near you as you're rolling away. And that's because the hitboxes in this game are notoriously unreliable. You have to know what the imaginary hitbox is, not what it would appear to be based on the visuals you see with your own eyes. You have to kind of guess where you think it's going to be hitting you, not where you visually see it hitting you. And that's something most players don't want to put up with. And I understand that. I didn't want to put up with it either. But I enjoyed the story and the world and the setup of Elex so much that I was willing to put up with that jankiness. This is the kind of game that as you play it, you're mashing the F5 key. And any of you old school PC RPG players out there know, F5 is the standard quick save on PC. So for those of you console players or even modern PC players that don't play too many PC RPGs, hitting F5 used to, and sometimes still does, activate quick save, which saves to a standard quick save or auto save file. So this is the kind of game where if you know a battle's coming up, you hit F5. If you actually manage to kill anything in the game, you hit F5. If you see an enemy up in the distance and you're going to try to get around them but you may not be able to, you hit F5. If you succeed in any battle encounter in any way whatsoever, no matter how big or small, you hit F5. If you think you might encounter a tough enemy or any enemy at all in the near future, you hit F5. Basically, if anything at all happens, you hit F5. If your stomach growls because you're hungry, hit F5. If you take a deep breath, hit F5. If you sneeze, hit F5. If you cough, hit F5. Trust me guys, you never know when you're going to die in this game. You never know when you might inadvertently fall a distance and fail to use your jetpack to soften the blow and die. You never know when a big enemy's going to come out and one-shot you. You never know when one or more smaller enemies will suddenly come around a corner and basically kill you outright because your health wasn't at full. If you're about to talk to an NPC, you better hit F5 because you never know when you might accidentally choose a dialogue option that turns that NPC hostile towards you. You're not ready for it, they hit you one time, and boom, you're dead. Better get used to being killed in one shot, sometimes two, but generally speaking, a lot of enemies in this game, even things that you don't think are initially going to be enemies, like a character you're just talking to, will suddenly one-shot you out of seemingly nowhere. You've heard me reference the Fallout series when talking about this game, and it is somewhat fitting. There are a lot of beasts in this game that are referred to in the game as mutants, and that makes sense. There's the Moloch, which looks like a mutated creature. There's the Cyclops, which looks like a massive mutated creature. And there are other things that all look like they're mutated in one way or another. Many of these creatures would perfectly fit in with the Fallout universe. If they were to put some of these monsters from Elex in the next Fallout game, you wouldn't think twice about it. It would just look totally normal, like it belonged in the Fallout universe. And that makes sense because apparently the comet hitting the world of Magalan has mutated some creatures into these things that look like they could have been mutated by a nuclear bomb. Or rather, more accurately, the radioactive fallout from the bomb, because anything that's anywhere near a nuclear blast that goes off is basically incinerated. There are basically 4 types of enemies you can encounter in the game. There's the regular fauna in the game, which are things like rats and other creatures that normally aren't hostile towards you. There are some bugs called isopods. You can choose to fight these things if you want. You can collect stuff from them that you can use in recipes or sell, but they're generally not hostile. Then there are most of the other creatures that are hostile. There are various different levels. You then also have mechanical things like robots, the cyborgs, or the mechs that will attack you on sight or may not attack you depending on what faction they're part of. And then, of course, there are humans. And as we all know, humans are wildly unpredictable. You generally don't know which humans will attack you until you realize what faction they're part of or what type of group they're part of. The one group of humans that would always attack me, they were always hostile, were known as Reavers, and I didn't entirely figure out exactly how they fit into the story, but if I ever encountered any that were labeled Reavers, they were going to attack me. The other humans in the game may or may not attack you depending on the dialogue that you've had with them, what you've done with that faction, and what faction you're currently part of, so you have to kind of figure that out as you go. Sometimes you'll encounter a group that looks like it should be hostile towards you, but it's actually like, say, a separatist group from the main group, and they're not hostile towards you, at least not initially, as long as you cooperate with them or are not hostile towards them. Now, it's not only the decisions you make and the dialogue options you select that can determine whether a group will side with you or against you, but it's also what's known as your cold level, which essentially could refer to your emotion level. If Jax's cold level is either too low or too high, certain dialogue options will be presented, but they'll be locked off. In fact, if you try to choose them, it'll say that your cold level is either too high or too low. And I found this quite annoying because I wanted to side with a certain separatist group, but because of my cold level, I was stuck only being allowed to choose one of a number of options that basically made them hostile towards me, and I'd have to fight them. There was no way for me to not be hostile towards them at the end of that dialogue tree because I was locked out by my cold level. Certain things will reliably change your cold level, such as using Elex to make Jax stronger. That pushes your cold level in a certain direction, and it's made very obvious to you. However, other dialogue options will adjust your cold level up or down, and it doesn't seem to make any sense when they do. You can choose something that seems like it should raise your cold level, but it lowers it, and you'll choose something that seems like it should lower your cold level, but it raises it. And it doesn't always make sense based on the dialogue option you've chosen. Also, the relationships you build are not always consistent. You really have to pay attention to who you're talking to because you may choose an option that makes sense to you that that character should like what you're saying, but because of that character's personality and their mindset, their perception of the world, it'll actually make them less friendly towards you. For example, there's a character in the game, a female, named Nasty, and you may wonder, well, why would they name her Nasty? Well, it's because she is nasty towards you. She uses a lot of foul language, she's aggressive in her language, but if you kind of meet her where she's at and you're on an equal plane with her, you can actually get in good with her and she can become a companion. But if you follow what you might think a normal person would like, Nasty won't like that, and that'll make her less friendly towards you. While you certainly don't have to join a faction, the game really pushes you to do so. And honestly, the sooner you settle on a faction, the better off you'll be, because you can start working your way up that faction. And the higher you go in those faction ranks, the better the gear that you can acquire. My recommendation is settle on a faction pretty quickly and try to get the best gear that that faction has to offer so that you have the best chances of surviving in this very brutal, hostile, and unfriendly world of Magalan. Now, a question may come up, is Magalan Earth? And I don't think it is. Not only is Magalan never referred to as Earth, but there's really nothing in there to indicate clearly that it is Earth. You may think it's Earth on the basis that there are humans here and that there are things like cars and old buildings and things that you would find on Earth, but other than the fact that this is the kind of stuff that a human civilization would create, there's nothing in the game clearly indicating that this is Earth. Neither the topography, the geography of the planet, nor anything else anyone says indicates you're actually on Earth. So I don't think Magalan is a term for Earth in this game. I think this is just a different world where humans exist. Now, how did humans get here? Well, there's nothing in the game that seems to indicate that, and I don't think the developers really go into it. You're just supposed to accept that this is an alternate kind of Earth, but it's referred to as Magalan, and it's not the Earth we know. Now, I am about to go into some story spoilers, and because I don't know how long this is going to go on, I can't give you an exact time code at which it's going to end. However, I will put the word spoiler at the top, and once that word disappears, I'm done with spoilers. So you can probably just mute the audio and let it play for a bit, skip forward a bit until you see the word spoiler disappear. Here we go. Spoilers, guys. So as has already been mentioned, this is the world of Magalan, and it has been wrought by a devastating comet that has set the world back quite a bit. It's somewhat post-apocalyptic, almost as if a nuclear bomb had gone off, and that makes sense. So what is Elex? Well, it's the substance that was contained in the comet, and how did it come to be here? Was the comet a simple fluke of the natural order of space? It just happened to stumble upon the world of Magalan and crash land here? No, not at all. You see, scientists knew it was coming for quite a while, and they tried to create a solution to get off the planet, a rocket ship, which they named Kalan. So that explains why the clerics believe that Kalan is this god that's going to save them. Kalan is actually the rocket ship that was supposed to save them, except it actually failed. The rocket ship is still very much on Magalan. It never took off. You can find the rocket ship within the game world, and you can actually confront the clerics about the secret behind who and what Kalan really is. I actually did that with one of the main leaders of the clerics. I confronted him about the secret of Kalan. I actually F5 to quick save before that because I figured that would either get me kicked out of the clerics or make them hostile towards me immediately. It didn't. In fact, the leader seemed to know exactly what I was talking about, and he simply asked that I keep it quiet, and I agreed. I said, yeah, sure, I'll keep it quiet, that your god doesn't exist, and it's really just a failed spaceship. And the dude's like, okay, thanks, let's just go on being clerics like nothing ever happened and continuing to worship Kalan, this false god that we know is false. And I'm like, okay, sure, we'll do that. There's a lot more I could explain about the story. I'm not going to ruin it all, but towards the end, you eventually get to the hybrid. It's a necessary part of the game, and you find that the hybrid is a hybrid between a scientist and technology. This is a scientist who is using technology to infuse himself and the albs around him with as much Elex as possible to further their evolution. And what is that evolution towards? It's towards a new species that can eventually, hopefully, survive the upcoming threat. And what is that? Well, it's the fact that the Elex comet was not a natural thing. The comet was sent to the Earth by an alien species to begin terraforming the planet in preparation for their coming. And we can all safely assume that when this alien species arrive, they're not going to want to find a sentient species already in charge of the planet. In fact, they're probably going to want to wipe them out. So we got to prepare for these aliens by utilizing Elex, making it a part of who we are so that we can become stronger and eventually, hopefully, either work with the aliens to live with them or to fight them. Seems that the hybrid has given up the notion of fighting the aliens. They're just too powerful. After all, they're powerful enough to direct a comet to our planet. And he believes the best course of action is for us to evolve, or at least the people of Magalan to evolve, to be one with the aliens, to at least be a species that the aliens will tolerate and allow to exist, even if it is in slavery and servitude to them. And let's be honest, if you feel like you have no chance of fighting this superior advanced alien civilization that's coming to dominate your planet, I think that at least serving them in slavery might be better than the total annihilation of your species. So, I mean, what would you choose? Would you rather fight a knowingly hopeless war and see your species annihilated, completely wiped out? Or would you rather just give in, become more like the aliens, and serve them and continue to exist? Me? Well, I'm very much a pragmatist. I, for one, welcome our new alien overlords. May the Elex empower us all, and may we serve the aliens. You could try calling me a traitor to the people, but guess what? You're dead, so you can't call me anything, and I'm still alive, so really, who won there? And this is now the end of the spoilers, and I've taken the spoiler word off the screen. So, I may go back and actually put the correct time code in hindsight. I'll just figure out when that's going to be and slap it in there. So let me give you guys some recommendations if you're going to jump into the world of Elex, and most likely Elex 2, even though I haven't played that one. I've heard a lot of similar things about it. If you start this game out and realize it's just moving way too slow, you're too frustrated by it, and you're particularly frustrated that the combat is just too janky for you to incorporate a lot of skill to overcome these difficulties, and you just have to collect better and better gear to actually get better at the game, then might I recommend not only do you download some of those mods that will make the game, well, move quicker, be easier, be more balanced, hopefully. You may also want to go ahead and get a hold of a tool to basically cheat the system. After all, this game is kind of cheating you. It's not reliable. The dodging and the hitboxes are atrocious. The combat's awkward. Sometimes things don't work the way they're supposed to. Things can break. You can find your character moving backwards to the controls if you're drinking while in the middle of combat, like drinking a health potion. So what I recommend is pick up something like the old Wii mod, which has been renamed, I think it's been renamed Wand. You could also use Cheat Engine. What I recommend here is don't make yourself invincible. Don't give yourself infinite health. Don't do something crazy like that. Just give yourself a little bit of extra experience, maybe some attribute points and skill points. Give yourself a little bit of extra currency in the game, some elixir, and use that to further your character to go ahead and skip some of the boring early hours in the game. And once you've done that, you can probably set that tool aside and not use it anymore. Like I said, you really don't want to use these cheats to basically make the game an absolute cakewalk. Just use them to get the game going a little faster so you don't give up on it because of how slow the initial slog of the experience is. If you can get beyond that hump of how slow the game starts out and how long it takes for you to really get anywhere, then you might find Elex is actually a really enjoyable game that you could play to completion. And that's precisely what I did. I don't want anyone here thinking that I went through the full Elex experience without any assistance, and I not only used those mods, but I did actually give myself some extra attribute points, skill points, leveled up, and gave myself some extra currency so that I could get things going off the ground a lot faster than the hours and hours it would require to get anything worth anything in the game in terms of gear goes. I think the game is just way too slow to get going, and for that reason a lot of people are going to put it down and not enjoy the rest of what Elex has to offer. It's a really interesting game world. It's got a lot going for it. The story's pretty awesome, the dialogue is solid, good voice acting, good music, interesting character designs, interesting enemy designs, and like I said, a really good payoff at the end. So I think this game is worth going through. It just may be very frustrating for most players to get started when it goes so slowly initially. So if you have to use some cheats to do that, don't feel bad about it. This allows you to enjoy a game that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get through. The world of Magalan is actually pretty interesting. There's a lot of visual variety, and it looks really solid. It's not the best looking game, but it's not bad by any means. It performs well enough, at least it does at this point. I did not pick up the game initially on release, so I can't comment if it had issues prior to any patches. It runs really well on my system, often above 100 FPS, and I'm running an AMD Ryzen 7 9800X3D, 64GB of RAM, which is basically overkill. You only need 32 for most games. An NVIDIA RTX-4080 Super, and an NVMe M.2 SSD. Not the best of them, but good enough. So if you have a fairly decent and powerful PC, it should work just fine, and maybe you don't even need that much. I can't comment much on the consoles because I don't play on consoles unless I absolutely have to, and it's for a game I insist on playing that I just don't think is going to come to the PC, so can't really say anything about those. You can look it up online. While the controls are initially a bit janky getting used to, they work well enough. You can either play with a gamepad or a mouse and keyboard. Just be aware that if you start using the mouse and keyboard before hooking up the gamepad, I don't think it'll switch over the prompts. I think it'll get stuck on mouse and keyboard. And I noticed also that if I have a gamepad connected, if I start using mouse and keyboard, it doesn't switch the prompts over to mouse and keyboard. They remain gamepad prompts. But as long as you know what the buttons are, what the keys are, you shouldn't have much of an issue. So you can play either way. You can either use mouse and keyboards, perfectly serviceable, or gamepad. In my case, I spent most of my time with the gamepad. It just seemed to fit better for an action RPG. Third-person action RPG, almost always prefer gamepad for those. The creature designs are really cool, as we discussed, and the level of detail on many of the NPCs, the human NPCs in the game, is really incredible. Many of the weapons and armor sets in the game go well above and beyond their AA status here. They punch well above their weight. Wandering around without any particular quest in mind is actually rewarding, as you can find a ton of stuff, sometimes some pretty cool gear. You can also find a lot of currency, other items that you can sell. You can collect herbs and other things in which to either use them directly to get more health or mana, or you can turn them into potions through crafting. And you can also just find some cool stuff in the game. You can wander about, discover something that you don't have a quest for, and you'll actually pretty much get credited for the quest later. When you encounter the quest giver, you can just tell them, hey, I already did that, and then you get the credit for it. And it's also always awesome when you stumble upon a warp point. You can unlock it by walking up really close to it or on top of it, and then you can warp there anytime you want, or, well, almost anytime you want. While you can jump and climb in the game, you don't have to worry if there's some ledge that's slightly out of reach, because you just use the jetpack to get up there. So the jetpack really makes a huge difference in how much more fun it is to explore and wander around in the world of Magaland, because if you see a chasm that you can't initially cross by jumping and you're not sure how to get around it, you just jetpack across. But you do have to be careful, because the jetpack is very limited, so it doesn't allow you to just fly all over the world, which will kind of break the consistency of the world, but it does give you the opportunity to cross chasms, to jump down from heights that would normally kill you, and to reach heights that are just slightly or a little bit above what you could reach naturally. Would I overall recommend that you pick up Elex? Well, I have to say this. If you're not familiar with the kind of game that Piranha Bytes develops, then this has a huge caveat, huge red asterisk on it as a maybe. You gotta know what you're getting into. You can, of course, if you're on Steam, purchase the game, play it for up to 2 hours, and then refund it if it's not for you, which may be the case. But if you think you might be willing to give something that's different a shot and willing to put up with some jankiness and awkwardness, then Elex might be right up your alley, especially if you're a fan of third-person action RPGs, and especially if you want to try something that's not like all the others. I want to thank you so much for clicking on this video and seeing it all the way through. Most people give up on videos very early on, so if you're here at the end, you're one of the few. You're one of the troopers, the absolute best of the best. Make sure to like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment down below, let me know what you think, that really helps out. You can join the channel or join my Patreon, there are links in the description. And a huge shout out and thank you to our Patreon supporter, Freeman Phil, super awesome guy. Once again, thank you so much. I'm Fox with RealMarcFoxx, and I will see you next time.